All right, at this time, we're going to call it to order. And if you will, please roll the emergency announcement.
Want to do roll call first?
Okay, we'll do roll call first. Amy's going to do roll call.
Okay, Kane? That's you, Mike.
I'm here.
Carver? Here. Cox? Here. Crawford? Graves? Here. Hackney? Here. Heron? Here. Lewis? Here. Mitchell? Monroe?
Here.
All right, now we're ready for the emergency announcement, please.
Before we get started, let me read the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you've reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and of emergency vehicles.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes and discussion. Everybody good? All right.
Carver, or who seconded?
Second, yes. Okay. Amy, would you take,
We can do approval of the minutes via just voice vote. All in
Yes.
favor?
oh, okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Sounds like we're approved. Okay. Next is the items on the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the items on the agenda?
No.
Input on items on the agenda, yes. Don't we need, I'm sorry. What am I missing?
That's for the public, Mike, so just.
Oh,
if
input
anyone
from the
needs-
public.
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Is there any input from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to items on the agenda.
No.
Can I?
Number 5.
Do what now?
Number 5.
Okay, Cronus update. Uh-oh. Oh, you have to hit in. Didn't fit. Don't have a mouse? You may have to, yeah. Okay. Okay. That's just for public input or for your information, I'm sorry. Everybody good? Any discussions? Sounds like we're ready to go on to Net 3 assessment, and we'll have it ready here for you in just a minute. Okay. We are having mouse problems.
Mike, if I may, while you're having those problems, let me give a little context here for the report, please. You're hearing from a company by the name of Net 3 today. They were engaged by the county to do an assessment of our IT systems and department as a result of the transition of leadership in that department. And that's why you're hearing from them today. They have prepared a report that you've been provided, both the presentation and then a little more detailed report that accompanies that in the folder that you've been handed. The two individuals here today are Jeff Scott, who's in the glasses, and Neil R. Wood, who is not in the glasses but handing out the material to you right now.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started, if it's all right with the committee. My name is Jeff Scott, and like I said, we are with Net3 IT, and we were asked to complete a technology assessment looking at the Information Technology Department as a department, also the applications that are used to serve the various individual organizations within the county government. To do that process, we interviewed over 44 different individuals representing county departments and officials, elected officials, to try to get a good understanding of all the applications that are being used throughout the organization. We then went and used some software discovery tools that allow us to go out and see what systems are in the network. Brings us back a lot of information, helps us analyze things much more effectively, to look at software, look at systems, servers, routes, those type of things. We then reviewed the applications supporting the different organizations, in part by interviewing the individuals that use those applications, and in part by looking at some of the software, how it's being used as it compares to best practices. Then we reviewed backups, security and related communications, networks, and disaster recovery strategies, and we documented all the problems and opportunities that were in that set of findings. Next page, on page 3, we'll go through kind of the as-is. One of the benefits we had coming in fresh, we did not have any background on how we got to where we are. So what we're doing here is really just an observation of where things are today from our perspective. First we saw was pretty much a general lack of strategic IT direction, meaning that a long-term plan and how to get there that was written and then used by the organization to help accomplish the business objectives. There were a lot of incomplete IT projects. We discussed those with the various individuals and the various groups, how we discovered those type of things, and that generally leads to user frustration. Heard a lot about some unplanned downtime, applications stopping in the middle of the day, network communications stopping in the middle of the day. We saw some duplication of infrastructure and support as a way for individual departments to overcome some of those issues. We then saw a broad range of custom, non-integrated applications that are used for each individual department. Some do have some integrations, and those seem to work well, but a good part did not allow the sharing of information, or the information that was shared may have been out of date or not yet updated from some integration opportunities there. We looked at critical line of business applications that are no longer supported. In part, it's because personnel is no longer available that has intimate knowledge of those applications. We saw some unreliable internet connectivity that is severely undersized and without failover capabilities, and we'll talk more specifically about that on the next slide. We also saw significantly outdated network infrastructure that was unmanageable and void of support contracts. Wireless network we saw was limited in some of the areas and was unreliable. We also saw that the current phone system is beyond its life expectancy and also was somewhat unreliable. We also noticed in asking for documentation on disaster recovery plans and IT policies, we did not have any of those presented to us. So we did not have any disaster recovery plans to review from that standpoint. On the next page, thank you, there we go. Now, we kind of talked about a little bit about what we found as key points, but now comes the question is how do we resolve those type of things? What we heard a lot were application performance issues, and if you look at this stair-step approach here, you'll see that as several layers up from where things start. The users are the ones that use the application. That's where they experience these outages. However, we've come to understand that a lot of those outages are due to fundamental layers that are deeper into the network, mainly in the communication layer and the physical network infrastructure. So to make applications run smoothly and efficiently and reliably, we have to first address the foundation. Just like building a house, we have to have a good, strong foundation before we can build the structure and the walls and then actually be able to live in that. So that's where we are. So this gives a picture of how things should be built, and also is the way we have prioritized both budget as well as projects in the recommendations to make sure the foundational layer is solid, and then you can build up from there. Physical network infrastructure is your network cabling, your routers and things, the electronics that make things come together. The next piece is wireless networks, which is used a lot nowadays with the various, especially in the courts, where users need, judges and so forth, need to have access through their mobile devices, whether it be laptops, tablets, or other types of mobile devices. There's a question on hosting decision, meaning server infrastructure, where best to put the applications moving forward. These are all to address some of the application performance, and then after those items are met, there's consideration to be made for a new fundamental ERP system, which stands for Enterprise Resource Planning System. That is an integrated system whereby users can enter data once and use it everywhere, as opposed to a lot of re-entry. And it's also typically those are real-time data, so data input in one part of the system is immediately available by all. And then, of course, the last part would be after the requirements and those type of things are clearly defined, then the actual implementation of that type of application. Specific recommendations on how to go forward, and these are listed in what we feel is the order of priority. First of all, need to address the IT leadership positions that have been vacated and provide some oversight, procure a CIO for transition period. We do not believe a Chief Information Officer, which is what CIO stands for, is needed long-term. We do think that an individual that has some extreme experiences in handling large projects and transitions is going to be necessary for a period of time, but we do not see that as a full-time need. The next piece would be to procure a director of IT. This is a working/managing individual that will be involved typically about 60% in doing and about 40% in managing and helping with the day-to-day assignment of tasks and delivery of services and leading the IT organization on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and clarification there, so we did not feel that that particular position could be filled at this point in time from within the organization, and that's why we put it as a procured position. Create a technology team to lead and communicate changes to the organization. This is a tactical team to meet and make sure that the oversight for the day-to-day IT activities that are being performed and the types of applications and priorities of delivery of those applications are steered not just by IT, but by the user community at large. They're actually using the applications, are most affected by the applications. We also state that we need to create clear roles and responsibilities for existing IT staff, making so that there's basically so work can be executed without a lot of redundancy. We need to fix and update physical infrastructure at the courthouse. We start there because a lot of the key servers and things are at that location, and it does seem to be a core of the organization as far as the data communications. We wanted to update the switch and router infrastructure. Again, these are the connectivity pieces. Bring those up to date with more speed for one thing, but also for manageability so that we can see from an electronic standpoint what's working and what's not. Want to install properly designed and redundant internet connections in the back of the, do we put the diagram in that one? Okay, so we do have specific diagrams available that can help us to execute on the redundancy. What this is, when we talk about redundancy in information technology, it's so that some piece of the network and or servers could go down because of normal fatigue and failure, electronic failures, but the usability of your services, the applications will remain working. So in the case of internet, one piece of internet connectivity goes down, another piece kicks in and keeps going. We want to install, we want to replace the phone system. We put that later in the process because to do with a more modern phone system, the infrastructure has to be in place, the electrical and the wiring infrastructure has to be in place before you can put a new phone system in. Those are typically more cost-effective using the existing network communications as opposed to running separate wiring for telephones. Install properly designed and located wireless access points with layered levels of security. What we mean there is that there is a piece that is open to the public for general services. There's a piece that is secure, that is behind the security structure and used by members of the employees of the county. Upgrade core server infrastructure with failover and disaster recovery designs in mind. Next piece is to purchase and install enterprise resource planning system. Now again, if you'll note, all these other pieces have to be in place before we really start looking at the application layer. Consolidate applications where possible. We did see some opportunities where there needs to be some cooperation with the various courts and some of the groups that we could get better integration of applications by using the same types of platforms. We would recommend migrating to Office 365 for email and update Office support applications. We saw a lot of variety of applications that were not all up to date and creating some challenges as we're sharing documents. Also, looking at those types of things which can be offloaded from IT completely into more of a purchase service. We want to look at opportunities for that, and that's the recommendation for Office 365. We want to install a help desk ticketing system to help track and feedback to the user community those people who are requesting things to be done, to be able to see where they are in the queue of things to be done, and then also help the IT organization prioritize workloads. Last two items here, implement IT policies and procedures. These are really to help guide and direct users in appropriate use of IT technology, also to protect the county in making sure that proper security structures are in place, as well as disaster recovery plans are in place and practiced. And finally, implement a formal technology refresh program. One of the challenges with the county government, as in any nonprofit organization, is money is always tight. And it's very difficult to upgrade equipment. But by doing so, a huge void has risen to where a lot of equipment is quite aged and needs to be replaced. Now, what's it going to cost? That's the fun part. We put in some figures here to guide the committee in understanding the priorities. We did list this also in order of priority, again, to match the recommendations. CIO services as a period of time, roughly $5,000 a month. A director of IT, this is considered all-in expenses, $95.80. Courthouse cabling and related network structures. Now these are, just so you understand, these are budget figures. We do believe these to be very accurate, but they are not to be considered quotes because that would come from the various vendors that actually provide those services. Courthouse cabling and related infrastructure. If you'll note there's a line down there that goes through some of the detailed pieces all the way down to where it says core firewall. Those have to be done in a group. So when you make that decision, from a financial perspective, that group has to be done because it contains all the pieces. Once you put the cabling in, it has to connect to the electronics to make that work. Next would also be then the core firewall. That is a security device, typical of most networks used to guide what can come in and what can't come in, and then also apply various security services that are normal to a networking. Secondary internet at the courthouse would be creating a second provider. We do recommend that second provider be an alternate vendor totally from current providers. That way, if one of the companies goes down with their internet connection, another, typically that doesn't affect all providers at the same time. Then we go into site firewalls. These are at the various buildings throughout the county. We do ask that those be updated as well. This would include the library, the Ops Center, Justice Center, and then the Ag Department, Health Department, Animal Center, Probation, the voting, and the mall. This is really just to help control flow of information. It will also be vital when we look at the internet design that's been proposed so that those local entities can be going out their own internet connection, but also provide redundancy to the whole organization. The next piece is looking at site primary internet. So once these routers are in place, we now then can come back behind that and add the local internet to those various buildings. And the structure is such that it would then allow failover. So if it fails, for example, if it fails at the op center, it would traverse the network, come back out through the courthouse, and still get to the internet. That goes back to the redundancy we talked about. So that, again, why do we do that? So the end users don't see downtime and things can keep working. The IT group may be scrambling because of the alarms and stuff to go fix things, but the organization as a whole would not see that. So those three pieces are there. Let me continue on to the next page. Finally, looking at the phone system. Phone system, we based these expenses on 320 phones. I believe that was the number that was given to us. Mike, would you confirm that? Mike, was that confirmed? Was that 320?
Yes.
Okay, so that's just a unit cost of the phones and equipment to get those updated. And then ongoing expenses for long distance services and things like that would be as part of that phone system. Office 365 Productivity Suite, this will allow everyone to be working on the same version of Microsoft Office county-wide, and also this subscription service would also keep it up to date, allow everything to be at the latest revision. Wireless Courthouse, this is what's called wireless access devices, wireless access points. These are little appliances that are scattered throughout the buildings to provide that wireless connectivity. Moving on down from the site, from the wireless at the courthouse, we also have then the various site wireless devices. These are complementing what's in place today and or replacing what's in place today. The other thing about this wireless network design, it would work no matter where you are in the county. So if I am authorized in one section of one building, I could go to any other building with the same credentials and get on there with the same security that I'm accessing in my local building. So it makes it a lot easier for the users to migrate from building to building. Then we look at the server infrastructure. This is updating the servers that run the applications. This is, again, a fault-tolerant design built with disaster recovery in mind. So if one piece of hardware fails, the system continues to keep running. That's a normal network design in most of the new applications that you see today. Finally, the bigger ticket item is Enterprise Resource Planning System. This is a core piece of software. I did put in here the cost of acquiring the software and the labor to install that. This is based on experiences that we've helped manage through a variety of different enterprises. There's a secondary internet fiber extensions. We did not have a price available for that. That is where the county-owned fiber is close to a building but not in a building. The cost to install that and extend that will come in very handy as we start doing the redundant internet connections and keeping everything consistent. PC replacements. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there is an agreement already in place with a construction company that does the fiber already, and we don't have access to that agreement, so that would come through that. Would that be a fair statement? Okay. And then looking also PC replacements. This is really for 75 PCs to be replaced that are out of date and quite aged. And then to start that process of an annual budget for these types of quarterly, every 4-year type rotation of equipment. So you have reasonable speed and reliable equipment to operate on. Final piece is a Tensys application subscription where we're looking at the clerk and master office, bringing that up to the same software as some of the other groups, and that would be that subscription. At this point, I'd leave it open for questions.
Thank you. Who commissioned this study assessment?
It was done through the mayor's office.
Okay, how much did it cost?
$8,500. It was a not-to-exceed expense.
8,500? Okay. I see all of this. What's the time frame?
The realistic time frame to implement what's listed here is going to be about 18 months to 2 years. You can't just take one piece of it and just ram it in. It has to be a series of steps that have to be done. Do it without bringing the county down.
Okay, so everything on here, I'm assuming you recommend. Do you have it says priorities and financials, but do you have a alternate plan, or like this is plan A, this is the maximum, plan B for a lower budgetary cost? Do you have anything outlined like that?
We came at this with what we consider the most optimal plan, both financially and tactically. So an alternate plan to this, as you get into any type of give and take, there's always going to be some implementation decisions that would be made at the time, and that may be with the particular contractor of how they want to implement. But from a financial perspective and a prioritization perspective, it's going to, plan A, plan B are pretty much going to fall in that same process.
But so we don't have an alternate plan?
I do not have an alternate plan other than what we consider was the most optimal.
One thing to consider there is that the alternate plan would actually be implementing parts of this particular plan and leaving other parts out.
Right.
That would be how you would consider your alternate.
But do you have a list of what you consider the top of all of this, what the top goals are, what the most important needs are?
Absolutely. And that is in the order of priority there. The number one priority would be your communications infrastructure. Yep. Your IT leadership to help make these changes. If we go back to the recommendations on page 5, that is the top priorities in order of what we feel the best way to execute this plan.
And who are you recommending, or where are you recommending that we would get a CIO?
There's a variety of sources available in the region. That can be either, there's several contract organizations. You have SAIC, you have other entities. We do that as well, but there's many organizations like that in the area.
Okay. I mean, I think we can all agree that we need a director of IT. You know, that's a no-brainer. But so your next would be to work on the infrastructure in the courthouse?
Yes.
Okay. What about, is this what you consider a minimum, or is this what you consider optimal?
As far as the details of the budget, or be details of the
courthouse cabling and related network switches, all of this stuff that's associated there with the courthouse, and then there's secondary stuff at the courthouse. I mean, all of that.
We believe this is the optimal.
Okay. So you don't have an option for here's a minimum of what we need, this is just the optimal?
Yes, ma'am. There's a couple of things that we could say to, there's 2 routes we could have taken with this. Basically, the county has existing wiring, but unfortunately that wiring is highly departmentalized. It is not consolidated and centralized. So we're going to spend money in one of 2 ways. We're either going to spend additional hardware because of the number of data closets in the county, the way it's currently designed. And the switches are pretty expensive. And long term, based on the inspection we had, I walked around and looked at all the county data closets. When I saw the wiring, it wasn't so much that the materials that were put in place were not the appropriate materials, but the installation itself is not certified. And what we found is that over time, the way that the materials are installed affects dramatically the ability and really the longevity of any type of cabling installation. So what we're recommending is that to replace the cabling, you notice there's 400 Cat 6 connections on there. I believe that the most expeditious way to fix this problem is going to be to replace the cabling in the courthouse and then minimize the number of fiber connections and switches that will be required to support that.
Okay, you said it's not certified.
Correct.
Who does the certifying?
The people who do the installation. Oftentimes, installations can be done by local staff, and I don't necessarily know who did the installation here at the courthouse, but typically when you hire a third-party organization that does cabling work as a profession, they will actually bring a certification equipment behind them and produce certification reports that prove that every connection they installed will carry the rate of information that it is rated for. In this case, it would have been 1 gigabit connections, and that's great, but what I can tell is just by visual inspection, there's a few things you learn just by looking around. One of those things is that the twist of the wires has to be maintained all the way up to the installation panel, and visual inspection revealed that that was not the case in the courthouse.
And so what would that do? Reduce?
That's going to reduce the throughput of the organization. Yes, ma'am.
Or create drops in the
Yeah.
communications.
It can create what's called crosstalk on the wire. It can create drop packets, retransmissions, but ultimately it will minimize the effectiveness of the county's network in the courthouse.
And do you have any idea about how much it's being reduced right now?
It can be as much as 50 to 60% can be dedicated to crosstalk and retransmission
And do
drop
you have
packets.
proof that that's happening?
No, ma'am, we did not. We did not test the network itself, just the visual inspection of what is typical when we find in other places.
Okay, so we don't really know that that's happening. You just think that it could be.
Well, we see the symptoms when we talk about speed in the applications. These are all indications of looking at the core infrastructure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so from our IT guy, do we have that happening?
Now, repeat exactly.
Well, they just described two different things that could potentially happen with cross-talking and reductions in speed.
Yes, we have locations that do drop.
How many?
Well, we had just today and working in here with the open enrollment, we probably had to reset our wireless, I'll guess 9 times.
Okay, are these in areas where they've seen that?
Have
Yes,
they
ma'am.
seen it?
The data
Are they-
closets here would be one of those.
One of the
It's
areas.
not unique to this area, though. I think what you'll find is that as usage moves from area to area in the courthouse, particularly like at election time, it'll be in the election area. At open enrollment time, it would be where they did open enrollment. And at other peak times, when the facility is being most utilized, that's when you're going to find the congestion issues come to light.
So can you use the existing wires and just have somebody come in and rerun them correctly? Just replace them?
Yes, ma'am, you could do that if they
Not-
were all consistent. Unfortunately, they're not all Category 6 wires. Matter of fact, most of them are not. They are, there's a collection of multiple stages of Category 6 wiring. A majority of it is Category 5 wiring, but there are some that we saw that were Category 3 wiring, okay? And because of the nature of that mixture of wires, I really do think it's going to be best for the county long-term to get a clean slate of Category 6 wiring. We could obviously do something else, but what I found is that in cabling installation, a majority of the cost for cabling is not the material, it's the labor required to terminate and certify those cables. And in this case, we would be spending good money after a bad result of re-terminating and certifying old cables, which probably could have been replaced for another 30% of the cost.
Okay, what percent, are you talking about replacing 100%? Because you just said there was some Category 6.
Yes, ma'am, I'm talking about replacing everything.
Okay, just in the courthouse, or are we talking about replacing it in the schools and the
No, as a
Justice
matter of fact,
Center
I found that,
and we've got other facilities around the county.
Yes, ma'am. I did have an opportunity to visit most of the other facilities, and in particular, the wiring at the other facilities are in a little bit better shape than it was at the courthouse. So this particular recabling effort is really directed at the courthouse only. I do believe that we ought to try to see how the other facilities, Primarily because they don't have as many users, okay? And some congestion could actually be tolerated at smaller sites without much notice. But here at the courthouse, with so much activity and it being the hub of activity for the rest of the organization, really just isn't room for that congestion.
What's the, if we spent this money, what's the life realistically of that wiring?
8 to 10 years.
And that's industry norm?
Yes, ma'am, and that's exceeded. 8 years would be about a max. It depends on where we come into the technology curve. Category 6 wiring is not at the, it's not new this year. It's been in place now for several years. And it depends upon the advances in technology that are made, and it also depends upon the organization's adoption of those technologies, how quickly the organization adopts new technologies that require higher speeds. But for this particular Category 6 wiring, I would expect it to carry you at least 7 years.
And then it would need, does it wear out, or does it just get, nothing, faster stuff
Typically
comes
the,
out?
Yeah, that's what happens. What happens is that it doesn't wear out. The wires, nothing degrades on them. Ultimately, what happens is that it becomes obsolete because the newer applications require faster data than the wire is capable of handling. And so it has to be replaced because the applications and the subsequent switches and network equipment require it to be replaced to support the business objectives.
Okay.
As far as the wiring that's here, if I can just speak to that, the wiring that's in the courthouse and the Justice Center has been in place at a majority of it, a minimum of 16 years, because when the Justice Center was built in 98, 99, it was obviously built with new wiring. The courthouse was wired at that time, mainly for telephone system, because there was a new phone system in place. But so you're looking at the majority of everything here is 16 years old for the main part of the infrastructure, other than the fiber that was run, but it's probably been 7 or 8 years ago, maybe, something like that. So.
Okay, I have some more questions. The phone system, 320 phones, is that countywide or is that the courthouse?
That's countywide.
Countywide. And is that looking at voice over IP, or?
Yes, ma'am.
That would not be doing the older technology?
No, that would be right. And the reason we said that is because if we're going to make this, the recommendation for us that we've made to you guys is to replace those wires. We want to leverage that wiring not only for your data communications, but also for your voice.
Okay.
Let me correct something real quick. When you say countywide, it doesn't include schools.
Well, yeah, just the
So
things
that's
that are
general county.
under the
I didn't
Blount
know if
County
you-
government. The schools are separate entities.
So that would be the Justice Center and all the buildings around the county that are like the
Yes, ma'am.
old plant and all that?
Where the current phone system is now in place.
So there's 320, are we currently with somebody like AT&T or?
We're with Southeastern. We don't have maintenance because it's outdated, and we need to update.
So our phone system, how would you describe it that we currently have as to what you're proposing to bring in?
I would call it Fred.
I think it's unique. It's funny that you asked that because upon meeting Mike, one of the first conversations that we had was that was his greatest fear, was that he would come to work tomorrow and the county's phone system would not be working and that he couldn't get parts for it. I've come to realize since then that the county's phone system was purchased in 1998, but at the time it was purchased, it was 1990 technology. It's now 2015. And phone systems just don't last that long. They don't make parts for those, and we're a good 8 years past where that phone system should be used. Typically, a mean time to failure on electronics equipment, 8 years is about the max you're going to get out of most stuff without significant replacement. And the good news is that the county has been the beneficiary of extending that system for quite some time, but its time has come to be replaced.
The $750 monthly expense, what is that per device? What's that?
No, that's a usage-based calculation. The voice over IP application that we were recommending is a metered phone system. Too often what we're finding now is a lot of businesses and organizations pay for phone leased lines, and that's what the county is currently doing right now, and you pay for those lines whether you use them or not. They're called PRIs or T1 lines, depends on there's several kinds of lines that can be used for those, but ultimately, those lines are leased from a phone company or some other telecommunications provider, and you pay for them regardless of whether you use them or not. What we're recommending is a metered application or a metered phone system that is based upon utilization. And what we've seen in your organization is less than 10,000 minutes a month, and these numbers would actually support that kind of a calculation.
Where it says wireless for Courthouse, you may have touched on that a while ago, but what is that again? It says 20,450.
Yes, ma'am. That's an enterprise class wireless system. It's actually how your laptops, I believe, Mike, is that correct? It's how your laptops are currently talking to the network right now, okay? Instead of a cable, you know, we've got the 400 cabled connections that we're talking about. This is also the wireless connectivity. And what we're finding now is in industry standards, things are rapidly moving towards wireless for a lot of things. Not everything, but significant parts of a organization's infrastructure now are being conducted over wireless networks. So one of the things that we've proposed is a seamless, integrated enterprise wireless system for the courthouse. Not just that the wireless network would be available here in this room, but it would also be available in other areas of the courthouse seamlessly, so that as one person might leave one room and go to another room, the connection would not be dropped and information lost. It would remain connected.
And that's the equipment cost to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and the site wireless would be like little hubs or?
The site wireless, what we're saying there is extending the same philosophy at the courthouse to the other county sites. When we say site wireless, that's what's meant by that line item.
Okay. Did you all look at any other type of, yeah, I know you talked about email. Did you all look at any other email options?
In our experiences, we've looked at quite a few different email options. We've looked at Gmail, Office, self-hosted applications as well. In our experiences, and based on the usage of what the organization is currently using, felt that this would be the most stable, most cost-effective, and have the least amount of learning curve to make the transition to.
So do you have anything you could present on any other options?
What specific options would you like?
Well, I'm just looking at other options.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is another option, is that licensing email application software as opposed to subscription-based. We could actually go with a licensed option, but that requires significant capital investment in 1 year versus spreading out an operational expense over, like a subscription would, over multiple years. That's why we chose it, because some of the other stuff was going to be capital intensive. We thought that this subscription-based service might be the easiest for the county to sort of bring into the fold. And the other thing we liked about it was the fact that it really helped maintain clear consistency among the versions of the applications. Oftentimes when you buy licenses outright, the organization has a tendency to buy, one group is advanced, they've got the latest version, another department has a version back, another department might have 2 versions back. And the interoperability and data sharing sometimes can be a problem. With a subscription-based service like Office 365, that all goes away.
And what are we using now?
Outlook, we're using Microsoft mainly.
For the majority,
Was it a licensed?
Yes, ma'am. You're on a licensed model right now.
Okay. All right, I'd just like some more information on all the stuff that you looked at and how you came to your conclusions. I mean, this looks nice on paper, but it doesn't tell me really how you got to where you got.
Hopefully the content of the written report will help fill in a lot of those details, because it is
Is there a report?
Yes, ma'am. It's in your folder there.
Oh, okay.
On the other side, there's more of a full report. However, what I will tell you is that one of the things that you're going to find is that some of the things you're looking for are the very value that Jeff and I bring to the table. It is the ability to bring best business practices, because this is what we do for a living, bringing it to bear for the county. We implement these kinds of systems over and over again for different clients. So it's one of those things that you're not going to find that, oh, here's the process we use to determine that Office was the best fit. One of the reasons Office 365 is a good fit for you guys is because you're already using it, okay? So we have those kinds of things. It's minimal disruption to the business process when we can keep the same kinds of things that an organization is already using. So that's kind of one of our staples when we go into an organization, is that we try to typically look and say, how can we help them take technology steps toward the future in the least disruptive way? So that's kind of one of the things that we bring to the table. That's really not in our report, it's just how we operate.
Was there discussion with the mayor's office regarding the prioritization?
No, we brought this to light based on what we saw as far as the recommendations. We then did review that just to get some feedback. One of the philosophies we always work towards is we can make some great recommendations, but if they're not acceptable to the organization, then they're worthless. So we did have some back and forth with the different groups as we met with them, playing off different ideas and trying to understand the priorities. But when we put the prioritization together, we felt, well, we know that you can't jump to the application layer without first addressing the foundational issues. So that's a big part of what led to the prioritization.
Would it be appropriate for to get with the mayor's office and maybe find some equal ground and see what maybe our funding sources and possibilities are, so that we can try to make a decision on what we can fund, what we can afford,
Yes,
what
sir.
we need to do first?
Yes, sir. I think that that's kind of what we've understood, is that our objective was just to present what needed to be done, and the next step will be, I'm assuming the county will take those steps, the financial steps needed to say, hey, what can we do? How would we do it? We were just told to bring the things to light. So that's kind of what we've done, but I would expect that that's exactly what would happen.
Thank you.
I have another question. You said replace 75 PCs a year. How many do we currently have?
In all, at the time we ran our reports, and as far as number of users and number of devices don't necessarily correlate one for one, I would expect that you have significantly more than this. But as recent as 30 days ago, you had 231 unique logins to the county network. Okay, I may have that number wrong. Somebody said it's in the report though. It's 230, I think, 231, 238, somewhere in that neighborhood. Less than 250. That's how we use that 250 users in our quote. So I bumped it up a little bit to cover from some overages there. But for the most part, you've got, let's say, 250 computers, some of which may not even be connected to the network. So we wouldn't have known about those. But if you have 250 computers on your network, what we typically see as best business practice is that desktop computers have a life expectancy, and most people, this is what we're finding out are doing, is that they are leasing those computers for 4 years and hoping they get a 5th year out of them before they have to replace them. So in a technology refresh program, you would really want to have plans for 20 to 25% replacement to keep those things current as you roll forward. In laptops, it's about 3 years, and we're finding leases, and please understand those are dollar buyout leases. Those are not market value leases, so that at the end of that you own it for $1, and you hope that you get to use it for a year for free before having to go back in and paying for new hardware. But typically laptops are a 3-year lease, hoping you get 4 years out of them. Desktops are a 4-year lease, hoping you get 5 years. So your technology refresh on your end user equipment is somewhere between 20 to 25% of your total PC population that you would need to replace every year.
Was that 230 or 250? Was that is excluding schools?
Yes, ma'am.
That's everybody else?
Schools,
Sheriff's office? And
Sheriff's
all?
Department is not included. Schools is not included. Everyone else is.
That includes like the highway department and all that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right.
Library included in those numbers?
No.
We can't, thank you, John. We could not see that either.
So this would be a question then for the library, the sheriff, and the schools. Are they doing their own 4 or 5 year cycle replacement? Are they dealing with all that in their own year-to-year budgets?
We are not. We currently have machines that are probably 12 years old. Out of 80 machines we have for our cars, all of them are Windows XP, so they're all out of date as of April of 2014. Out of the probably 130 machines that we have in the Justice Center for the Sheriff's Office, we need to replace about 90 or 95 of those because they're also Windows XP machines as well, that many of them are 12 years old. The newest desktops we have, until the ones we got just a few months ago, were probably from 2009.
How about the schools?
Schools have a lot of the same problems the county does. They have a lot of XP machines. I don't think it's quite the same proportion, but they do have probably 25-30% are still XP machines.
Other questions? Well, thank you so much for your time.
I'd like to make a motion to forward this to the Budget Committee to review.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Do I have any other discussion on that?
It was mentioned a while ago about getting with the mayor's office for priorities. Don't we want to possibly consider that before we forward it on to the Budget Committee?
I think the motion is to just accept the report, is it not?
Correct.
To accept this report, then what I would think that we would probably do is sit down with the other elected officials. I think determining what priorities are, there needs to be a lot more people brought to the table with this report, to review this report, to decide what the priorities are. But I think we need to sit down with the other elected officials, including the Sheriff's Department, and you know, wherever we go with this, this is going to be and I don't know whether the schools are look to become involved in this or not, and that may be something we need to look at also. But I know we want this to be we want buy-in with all the elected officials on this, so that we don't have the same problems reoccurring where we have standalones in different departments. We need to make this a unified system. And I think by getting together and getting this thing in a priority, then we can then take it to the Budget Committee, possibly with the priorities in order.
So what are we forwarding to the Budget Committee?
This report.
When the collaborative effort happens amongst the elected officials, are they going to come back to us and give a presentation about their findings?
Well, they'll come to the Budget Committee, and then it will be forwarded, I'm assuming, on to the commission.
So are we going to hear about this again, or is this just pass on the report?
Well, what we're asking to forward is just the report itself, you know.
Okay. I do hope that that after the collaborative effort, that they'll come back to us and report to us on their findings and their priorities before the Budget Committee votes on anything final. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote. Or are we going to do a voice vote?
I'm doing it. Kane?
Yes.
Carver?
Yes.
Cox? Yes. Crawford? Graves?
Yes.
Hackney?
Yes.
Herron. Lewis. Mitchell.
Yes.
Monroe. Motion passed.
Nothing else on the agenda. I'll ask if there's any input on items not on the agenda.
Okay, I failed to ask this a while ago. On the memorandum about Chronos, it says in the second bullet point, minor adjustments to some of the configuration. The timeline has been adjusted to reflect these changes and some additional testing is needed. What has changed in the timeline? Are we looking at, how much longer are we looking at? And is that additional testing gonna cost more money?
Randy, will you address that, please? The original schedule was that we would have Chronos ready to roll out this month, and that has been changed now to January.
Okay, so payroll will
At
not
no
start.
no additional cost.
No additional cost, okay. Payroll will start in January with,
Yes. HR has already been implemented and installed, but the full integration, full operational status won't be until January.
and this, Chronos is not billing any additional for this?
No.
Okay. And can you tell me what, I mean, I see that they had to reassess. What was reassessed and why is it taking longer?
Because of the change in our project team leadership and some changes at Chronos, all the new parties decided it would be best to revisit the product design workshops and make sure before we rolled anything out that we didn't have anything that needed to be I forget what the term was, but basically relaunched. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I just had an update for, a few months ago, we talked about Spillman project for the sheriff's office. 911 has gone through with the purchase of their software for the computer-aided dispatch. The city of Maryville is going to pursue that as well. The city of Alcoa is going to pursue that. And so we, as the sheriff's office, are going to pursue that as well to take place. Initially, we'll be using software in the cars. Eventually, it will replace all the software we have in the Justice Center for jail and everything. So I know we talked about it a few months ago. The project's kind of changed from what that was before, as far as how it's being implemented, because other people are involved and everything. But just wanted to come back to the committee and say we are going to pursue that. The funds for the purchase of the software will be coming from our data processing contingency fund from within the sheriff's office. But there probably will be costs, as we discussed here, as far as hardware needs and so forth. There will be things that we probably come back with, and maybe in conjunction with the findings here, that we do need some hardware because of the age of some of the equipment we have. But I know we talked about it, that we've come back when the time was right to discuss what we were going to do, and we have decided. We haven't signed a contract yet. We do have a contract and have approval through purchasing as a sole source because of what 911 in Maryville and everyone else is doing through that project. But we just wanted to let you know we are going to pursue that, and we'll be implementing that over probably the next year.
Any other discussion? No one had any input on items not on the agenda. I'll ask now for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Move to adjourn.